want to start talking about Hinduism, and to start talking about Hinduism, I want to talk about the country, the place, which is the birth of Hinduism, which is India. And India is one of the oldest continuous cultures on the face of the planet, if not the oldest. It is a place that is really quite interesting, and if you ever go to India, you will find that the experience of being there really will take you out of your everyday Western sort of mentality. Anybody here ever been to India? Anybody here ever been to India? No one. Okay, so you all have something you can look forward to. I traveled through India really rather extensively as a young person who just graduated from college. I ended up traveling around the world for about a year, and one of the most incredible places I went to, and I still think it's one of the most incredible places I went to, was India and Nepal. And going there was like, I was living in Europe and ended up was in Italy, and it was around Christmas time, and people in Italy around Christmas time, being super Catholic country, were just freaking out about all this Christmas stuff, and there was everything everywhere, and just couldn't take it anymore, and thought, I'm going to go to the most pagan place I could possibly go to, and sold everything I owned, and hopped on a plane, and landed in the town of Bombay, which is now known as Mumbai. Now I can turn this back on. Okay. And getting off the plane would have been about the same as if I had landed on Mars and got off the plane. It was that strange, you know. Everything about it was different. The, you know, simple things like how close people stand to each other. In India, this would be perfectly okay, right? It's not different than our culture. So this is about, right? Okay. Different, right? Everything is different. People spoke English, so that was odd because they had a familiar language, and you know, English is the language of commerce in India because, of course, it was a British colony for a long time. But it was really different, and you had the sense that people thought differently. You know, the thinking patterns were very different. I was in India about 3 months. Going around, traveling by bus, by train, and for one part in the hold of a freighter of a ship, a freighter ship going down the coast of India, which was a great experience just by itself. It was really quite fascinating. What's that? No. Got paid for the cheap seats, which were down in the hold, where where the Indian college students would go because it was cheap and they could drink down there and no one would bother them. And we basically partied all the way down the coast and had a great time with them. And people were wonderfully friendly and kind, and it's just an incredibly beautiful country. And I can't recommend highly enough going to visit there. You may have heard recently they've been having some issues with women getting raped. And that is an unfortunate thing that I think clouds an otherwise wonderful place that I would highly recommend. If you're a woman, I do not recommend going by yourself. Okay, I don't recommend, especially out of the city in you know, either the outskirts of the city or more rural areas. Yes.
As long as you stay in the major cities and it should be okay.
Yeah, it should be. Even though there have been some problems even in the major cities, you know, again, but this is true not just in India, this is true like in many parts of the world. So, you know, you got to have some common sense and be safe, you know. It's true in Los Angeles, you know, I mean, I wouldn't tell most of you to go take a walk down in downtown Los Angeles at, you know, midnight on a Saturday night or, you know, whatever. I mean, you got to use common sense, okay? That's the only thing that I find, you know, that I caution people about India. Other than that, it's a really wonderful place. It's a very interesting country in the sense that there are actually lots of different kinds of people in India. I mean, the majority of people are Hindus, but you have like 13 different languages. You have Muslims in various parts. You have all sorts of different subgroups. We're going to talk about the grouping of people in India a little bit, but it's really a very interesting place. And it's actually, even among itself, it's fairly, within India, fairly multicultural. There's lots of different cultures or subcultures existing there. Okay? And again, English is the language of commerce, so lots of people speak English. It is the largest democracy in the world, direct democracy. And when I was there, people were very proud to tell me that. And, you know, some guy would be a street sweeper in the street, and I start talking to him, and you say, oh yeah, you know, we're a direct democracy. In the United States, you're not a real democracy, you know? You've got this republic, this, you know, electoral college, and some, you know, guy, I think he's like illiterate, he's lecturing me about the electoral college and how it's not a real democracy. You know? People are very proud of the fact that their country's a democracy. So let's go back and talk a little bit about the origins of Hinduism, the origins of a little bit about Indian history. And as you guys know, I like maps. No, I didn't bring my pointer with me, darn it. I like maps. This is a map of India. So, on the left side, as you're looking at this, is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then up there would be Iran, Iraq, and then you have the Middle East, right? And on this side, you have China, Myanmar, which used to be called Burma, and then over here would be Thailand, down here would be Indonesia, and of course China, and then across China to Japan. We'll be talking about, we're going to begin this class, we're going to be basically going east from India to China, to Japan. We'll talk a little bit about Thailand, Korea, these places, okay? So this is where we're starting out. And it's good to know maps. I'm really into the map thing. I like to show you guys maps, so I'll be showing you lots of maps. Now, there's a lot of people in India, and a lot of these people are Hindus, and in fact, there's a lot of Hindus in the world, and 1 out of every 6 people on the earth is a Hindu. Okay? Hinduism in some form is practiced by 80% of the population of India, Nepal, and the island of Bali. It's down in Indonesia. Hindus have immigrated all over the world, including the U.S., and there are around 60 million, it's probably more like 60 to 100 million Hindus in the world living outside of India. Okay. And we have about 2 million in the U.S. now. Okay, about 2 million people here are Hindus. So it's really a global religion. And again, even if you're not Hindus, the influence of Hinduism can be seen everywhere. Okay? Even in places that are not Hindu. For instance, now in Camarillo, as I mentioned, we now have a new yoga studio, right? Yoga is a practice that's derived from Hinduism. Doesn't mean that if you do yoga that you're a Hindu or you're forsaking your own religion or whatever, but the practice itself is derived from Hinduism. Okay? Very old practice. Okay? The history of India really starts way, way back. And there's evidence of 2 cities along the Indus River Valley. And this is right between, and again, I should have brought my pointer, darn it. This is right between, in this map, Pakistan, where you see Pakistan and India. This river is running right along that area there, the Indus Valley. And as far back as 7000 BCE, there were 2 cities, Megar and Birana, that were settlements, that were related to this river. A lot of great cities. You guys know this better than me because you've had geography more recently than I have, but lots of these cities pop up around rivers, and rivers allow for all sorts of things, commerce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these go way back. In 7000 BC. This is really one of the earliest civilizations that we know of. This slide's a little out of order. And what happens is by 1900 BCE, we now have a whole series of cities, including 2 really important ones, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. And these are two cities that have been studied, they've been excavated, all sorts of very interesting things. And these show what's now, that people talk about this as the Harappan culture, right? They named it after the city. And these cities are part of I don't want to say empire, let's just say a civilization. And this is very advanced. You know, they had running plumbing, running toilets, things like this. It was actually a fairly advanced civilization. And these cities were actually, really got to be quite large. And in fact, if you look at this slide, you'll see Mohenjo-Daro in 2000 BCE had 40,000 people living in it, which is really quite a large city for the ancient world. And they compare this in the slide to Paris. Paris around 800, the year 800 had about 25,000 people. So already 2000 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro had, you know, almost twice the amount of people as in, you know, in medieval Paris. So it's a pretty large city. 40,000 people is a pretty large number for an early city. Okay. And so these cities all grew up around here, and there was a civilization here. And what happens is around 2000 BCE to 1900, 1800 BCE, what happens is that basically, to put it simply, the river dries up. And there's actually two rivers. This is the Indus River. There's another river too, the Sarasvati River over here. So this doesn't show in this slide, the Sarasvati River. There's two river systems. And what happens is around this time, the climate becomes cooler and drier. There's climatic change. Heard about climate change, right? You know, we're talking about man-made climate change. This was not man-made climate change, but this was some kind of climate change that went on, and things become cooler and drier. The rivers dry up. Okay. And there's a collapse of the Sumerian Empire and the Old Kingdom of Egypt. That's happening further this way. Okay. And then related to this are Indo-European invasions from Afghanistan. So people coming from this area over here are starting to invade this area. The rivers are drying up. Things aren't looking good. So what happens is that people basically migrate out of these cities. They migrate, they leave, and they move more into the Indian subcontinent, further into the Indian subcontinent, where it's more fertile, where there's rivers like I don't have a picture of it here, like the Ganga River. Let me go back here. So people move from this area where you see the border with Pakistan, they move more toward the central part of India. And again, there's other rivers, and the most famous river in sort of north part of India is the Ganges River, and people start settling around the Ganges River, okay, in that area. So now, over time, the whole subcontinent of India now starts becoming populated. And again, you can see, but again, if you look at this chart, I think this is really interesting. This shows that Harappan civilization actually is around for a long time, about 1,600 years. Am I doing that right? Yeah, about 1,600 years. Civilization is around. That's a long time. So this was a long time. How long has the United States been in existence?
Like a little over 200 years.
Yeah, not very long. When we think the United States, yeah, we're here forever. It doesn't seem like a permanent thing. This civilization was around for 1,600 years, a long time, a really long time, before it eventually, kind of dissolves. Yes?
Aren't a lot of other civilizations been around a lot longer than that?
Yeah, of course. As a coherent, geographically bounded civilization, it's around for a long time. Okay. Now there was a pre-civilized India, which we don't know as much about. We call it Neolithic India, Neolithic people, and it was followed by Vedic India, okay, which is the civilization that is now in the main Indian subcontinent, right? Which again has a very interesting history. We don't have a lot of time to go into that. If we're in a history class, I would tell you all about how the Indian subcontinent gets populated, and there's various kingdoms and things, and these over time sometimes they unify and they sort of populate the whole subcontinent. Other times they sort of dissolve out, and later on what happens is that the Indian subcontinent is invaded, I guess is the word, by the Mughals, right? The Mughal emperors, who are the descendants of Genghis Khan. And they come in and they take over India, and then India breaks up into small principalities, and then what happens is that the next thing, I'm really compressing Indian history quite a bit here. The next thing that happens is that the British come, and the British then establish trading in India, and then through very shrewd political means play off the various rulers against each other and increase their influence, and eventually that leads to the British taking over and colonizing the Indian subcontinent. And this went on, from the 1700s on up until 1947, when India achieved its independence. It was British. And so again, one of the reasons why everybody speaks English in India is because the British were there for quite a long time. Okay? Now, if those of you know heard me lecture in my other classes, you'll know I'm not a big fan of colonization. Okay? When one group comes in and colonizes another group, it tends to screw up the people who are being colonized. And the same thing could be said of India. Colonization, perhaps you have the English language and you have train systems that run on time, but other than that, I don't really see much of the benefits of colonization. If we had somebody in here who's an Indian history expert, they could talk to you about the effects of the colonization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to go into that in this class because again, we're really going to talk about the traditional religious stuff, traditional philosophy, but not a great thing. Okay, and then of course India achieved its independence, and as soon as it achieves its independence, what does it do? It splits apart into Muslim areas and Hindu areas, and the Muslim areas become Pakistan and Bangladesh, and the main continent becomes where the Hindus are, and that becomes India. Okay? And of course, tremendous amount of conflict. That partition of India is attended by lots of genocide, lots of people being killed. It's not a happy split up. And even today, of course, there's a huge amount of conflict between India and Pakistan, both of which are nuclear powers, both of which have a lot of antagonism toward each other still, and it's still not a good situation. So that's my really brief, very simplistic history of India. Okay. Again, here's some pictures of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, in the Indian subcontinent here you can see. And again, there's all these sites there, and they've excavated these things, and they've found all sorts of really interesting things, including little carvings and things that indicate that many of the religious practices of modern Hinduism had their origin in this Harappan civilization, or at least there's a connection. I mean, there's little figurines of people, going namaste like you do in yoga class. There's figures that look like, Shiva, the god of destruction. There's pictures of him. There's pictures of people, indications that that women put the little red stuff right in their forehead. So all these things that we find in modern India, modern Hinduism, can be traced back to this Harappan civilization. So again, we think of Hinduism at least going back to this time, maybe back around 7,000 years. So this is a very, very old tradition that we're going to be talking about, really quite ancient. Now, the word Hindu comes from a Persian geographical term that was used to designate people who lived beyond the borders of the Indus River. Again, that was the Indus River that ran through there that dried up. And the word, Sanskrit word Sindhu means river. Okay? So again, rivers are central to these civilizations. The word also arises in 6th century Sanskrit texts to contrast the people in India to the Muslims. So there's Muslims and there are these other people of the river, Sindhu, and that eventually becomes Hindu. And then the Arabic term al-Hind was the term for people who lived in India who weren't Muslim. And the British began referring to Hindus during the 18th century in a manner which was synonymous to somebody being Indian. And then Hinduism was the term that was designated for the high caste Brahmins in 1830 by the British. Okay? And later this was adopted as a national identity by Indians, by Hindu Indians. Okay? So again, the word Hinduism, wasn't really a religion per se. Back in the day there was just religion, just philosophy. And people just practiced this, it was part of their culture, it's just what they did. And it was only till really relatively recently that we've come to label this as Hinduism. Okay, and this is one of the also reasons why Hinduism is an incredibly vast and expansive religion and philosophy, because it really just encompasses all these beliefs that all these people had that they were doing at this time. Yes?
Is this like Native Americans and the term Indian?
Well, the Native American term Indian comes because of the fact that the explorers thought they were going to India. They were trying to find a way around the world to get to India, and they ran into the American continent. And because it was a really long journey, I assume, and they were tired, they didn't realize they weren't all the way to India. You know, the navigation was not that good, so they said, hey, look, there's people here, we're in India, they're Indians, right?
Like now, Native Americans are like cool with the word Indian.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they are or not, but yes. You know, but definitely in India, people are self-identified now as Hindu.
Right.
And Hinduism is a Hinduism national movement, nationalism, in the Indian national movement, you know, which identifies very strongly with Hinduism. So you find that now in India, this term Hinduism has been adopted, and people will tell you that they're Hindu. But if people in India had been called, you know, Native Americans, you know, people were trying to get to America and they ran into India and they said, oh, these people are Native, look, the Native Americans. Probably the Indians wouldn't like to be called Native Americans, right?
But if they were called that long enough, they might as well just adopt it.
Well,
Seems like
I don't know.
Here.
But in this case, Hinduism has been adopted by India. All right. So let's talk about a definition of Hinduism. Okay? And this is hard, because Hinduism is really, really vast and expansive. Hindus worship some kind of supreme reality, and that can be personified in the image of God, or gods, or energy, or some sort of underlying truer reality to what we experience in an everyday thing. There's really, really many different ways in Hinduism of viewing this. Okay? And if you go online, you start poking around about Hinduism, you'll find this. You'll find people who really characterize Hinduism essentially as a monotheistic religion, and you'll find people who characterize it as a pantheistic religion. And both of those things can be true. Just depends on how you view things. Okay? Just like if you're a Christian, you say generally, well, we're monotheistic. We have one God, right? But then your one God has, you know what, 3 parts? Father, Son, Holy Ghost, right? There's 3, you know, Holy Spirit, you know, Jesus, and then there's God. There's parts to it. So in that way, it's sort of pantheistic, right? Hinduism is similar that way. But Hinduism also includes the idea that you could just think of these things as energy that we then personify, that represent this unknowable reality. Okay? So again, it's very, very, very broad. Hinduism teaches that all souls, we're going to talk about the definition of soul, the word for soul is Atman, all souls will ultimately realize salvation. In other words, they'll get off the wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering, and realize and be fully realized and aware beings. There's no eternal hell, there's no damnation, and Hinduism accepts all genuine spiritual paths, from pure monism, that God alone exists, to pantheism, to everything else. Hinduism also accepts other religions as genuine spiritual paths. Okay, this is an anomaly among religions, because most religions say our religion is the best and other ones are crap. Hinduism doesn't say that. They say all religions are valuable. Yes?
So one of the things that you're to do is escape from hell. So how does that play into Buddhism if there's no hell?
I'll talk to you about that when we get to Buddhism. Okay? But it's similar. That the hells that we have are not permanent. Okay, that we create. In Buddhism, we're going to get to a whole different thing. Because hell is something basically you create in your own mind. Buddhism is essentially a system of psychology. Hinduism is not. Okay, this is a big difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. We're going to get to that. Okay? So just be patient. We'll get to that. And ask that question again. It's a very good question. In Hinduism, each soul is free to find their own way, whether it can be by devotion, austerity, meditation, yoga, service to others, whatever it might be. There's many, many paths to the supreme reality. Typically, you find people involved in worshiping at the temple, in reading the Holy Scriptures, and in the guru-disciple tradition. The guru-disciple tradition is where you take a teacher, your teacher then guides you toward a better self-realization. Okay? And there's a relationship, a very strong relationship between the guru and the disciple. Okay? And if you're Jungian, Jung talked about this kind of relationship, again, between the teacher and the student. Again, there's an archetypal component to it. Okay? But very, very important. Festivals, pilgrimages, chanting of holy names, and worshiping at home are all practices that are very common among Hindus. Love, nonviolence, good conduct, the law of dharma define the Hindu path. Hindus believe that the soul reincarnates until all the karmas are resolved and you realize the supreme reality. Hinduism is a mystical religion, and in such you have to sort of personally experience whatever awareness that you're able to gain. You have to do this yourself. Somebody can't really do it for you. You have to personally experience your own karma, right? Somebody can't do that for you. Now, let's talk about a little bit about cosmology and time. You guys might find this interesting. Time, the word for time is kala, and it's a manifestation of Ishwara. And Ishwara is one of the number of older Hindu gods. We're not going to talk much about them because there's a lot of them, and we don't have infinite amount of time. But time also is also represented among the newer Hindu gods too, and I'll get to that in a minute. Past, present, future can exist simultaneously, but once they manifest in world time, it becomes a cycle. And this is the word Kala Chakra. We're going to see this again in Buddhism too. The Kala Chakra literally means wheel of time. Chakra means wheel, and Kala means time, wheel of time. This creates the illusion of life and death. It creates the illusion of, birth to old age, the things that we experience of time. Okay, this sort of linear experience of time that we have is an illusion. When we overcome this linear experience of time, then we can become immortal. Once you realize that all times exist simultaneously, then essentially you become immortal. Now, that's easy to say and hard to do, right? Time in Hinduism is not linear. And this also applies to ideas such as reincarnation. So theoretically, you're not bound to be reincarnated into the future. You could be reincarnated in the past, you could be reincarnated to various dimensions. It just depends on what your karma is. Okay? Now, habitually, since you've been moving through this illusion of time being linear, habitually most of us will probably reincarnate in the future because our minds are habituated with that, our souls are habituated with that. But that's not necessarily a requirement. Now, in Hinduism, there's 4 great epochs of time, and each of these ages or epochs is different in character from the others, and these form a cycle. Okay? The first 3 epochs have passed, and we are now in the 4th one. These ages or epochs are called the Sattva Yuga, the golden age of truth, the Treta Yuga, the silver age, the Dwarapa Yuga, the 3rd great age, or bronze age, and the Kali Yuga, the dark or the iron age. And we're in the Kali Yuga now. I have some video here to show you. Let's see if this still works.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay, anyway, I was going to show you this. There's a nice mantra you can say for being in the Kali Yuga, which can help you get by in the Kali Yuga, because the Kali Yuga sucks. It is the bad time, which we are all in now. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. So, there are 4 of these ages, and these 4 ages taken together are the Maha Yuga, great ages. Maha means great, Yuga means ages. Okay? These in total, one Mahayuga is 4,320,000 years total. The Sattva Yuga, the Golden Age, is 1,728,000 human years. Everyone is virtuous. There's no sin or vice. People are about 31.5 feet, 31 and a half feet tall. And the lifespan is about 100,000 years, and other counts, you live forever and you only die when you decide you want to die. The Treta Yuga, the Silver Age, is about 1,296,000 years, and people are about 3/4 virtuous and 1/4 bad, sinful. Okay. People are 10 and a half feet tall, and their lifespan's people are 21 feet tall, and their lifespan is about 10,000 years. Then there's the Dwarapara Yuga, the Bronze Age, which is 864,000 human years. People are half virtue and half virtuous and half sinful. They're 10 and a half feet tall, and their lifespan's 1,000 years. And then the Kali Yuga, the Darker Iron Age. It's 432,000 human years. This is our current Yuga that we're in. People are about 1/4 good and 3/4 bad. And they're about 5.5 feet tall, 5.1/4 feet tall, the lifespan of about 120 years. Now, those are the yugas. Now things get a little complicated. So you didn't think this was a math class, right? So I don't want to take math on Friday. I'll take Vulcan's class. Sorry. There's a little math in this class. It's not difficult math. It's not statistics. Okay. Now, there's different cycles of these yugas. There's one called the Manavatra. The Manavatra is 71 Mahayugas. Okay, 71 Mahayugas. So 71 times 4,320,000. You can figure that out. Okay. At the end of each of these Manavatras, there is a giant flood which covers the earth and destroys all the people and everything. Okay. And there are 14 Manavantras during each kalpa. What's a kalpa? Oh my gosh, now we're getting more complicated. We're going to talk about the Hindu gods, and one of the main Hindu gods is Brahma. In the life of Brahma, single day time in the life of Brahma is one kalpa. And a day and a night, the 24-hour cycle, is 2 kalpas. Each kalpa is 1,000 Mahayugas. So 1,000 times 4,320,000. How much is that? That's about 4.32 billion years. Okay. How long are we theorizing that life has existed on Earth?
A billion, maybe?
No, a little longer than that. How old is the Earth? Yeah, how old is the Earth? Yeah, I think you're right. How old is the Earth?
1.5 billion years.
What?
1.5 billion years.
Yeah, roughly around the same time as a kalpa. Okay? So, maybe these guys are onto something. Who knows? Okay? And so each kalpa, 1,000 Mahayugas. At the end of a kalpa, there are 3 worlds, there's hypothesized to be 3 worlds, and 7 underworlds are temporarily dissolved, and beings are reincarnated when the next day begins. So between kalpas, everything gets wiped out, but it's but your souls, all your Atman are put into temporary storage, and when the next day starts, you're now reincarnated into that next kalpa, which is nice. Okay. 720 years make a year in the life of Brahma, or 3 trillion 110 billion 400 million years. Okay. The life of Brahma is said to be 72,000 kalpas, or 311 trillion 40 billion years. At the end of the life of Brahma, all worlds are dissolved and no one reincarnates. The slate is wiped clean when Brahma's gone. Okay? So this is basically, this 311 trillion years essentially defines our soul's life, our soul's ability to exist. because we exist only while Brahma is going through his life. So this is 72,000 kalpas. Confusing a little bit?
A little bit.
A little bit. That's why I wrote it down for you. Okay, you can read it. Okay, now, we are supposedly in the 51st Brahma year. Okay. In the first day of the Varaha Kalpa, in the 7th Manavatra, in the 26th Mahayuga, or the 456th Mahayuga of the 1,000 Mahayugas that comprise a Brahma day. Okay? It's confusing. What you need to know is this. In this Mahayuga, we are in the 5,118th year of this Kali Yuga. Meaning that we're just at the beginning of the Kali Yuga. So that's the good news. So things are pretty bad. People are pretty despicable for the most part. But we're just at the beginning of the Kali Yuga. We're not at the end. Some people you'll see online, you go online and say, oh, we're at the end of the Kali Yuga. You know, everything's going to dissolve. We're going to go back. No, we've got about 426,000 years to go in our Kali Yuga. At least according to this one guy's calculation that I got this from. Okay, I'm sure you can go online and find different calculations. I have read stuff where people say we're at the end of the Kali Yuga. But I like this one because he was pretty precise and he says, no, we're at the beginning. So things are pretty bad, but the world is not going to end. What is it, September 23rd? They said the world is we're going to get wiped out. Apparently, according to Hinduism, that's not going to be the case. Okay? Yes?
So it mentions things like sin and virtue. Are those things laid out, or are they just...
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about what's sinful and what's virtuous. But it's the stuff that you normally think of. Okay? Killing people, robbing, stealing, not thinking about spiritual things, being materialistic, all those kind of things that, if you think it's sinful, that will count. The seven, yeah, right? Those kind of things. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Yes?
I just want to know, so it's saying like in 71 Mahayugas there's a giant flood.
Yes.
But here you're saying we're in the 26th?
We are in the 7th.
We're in the 7th.
Yeah. So, again, giant flood does not seem imminent. And again, there's also things where things burn up too. I didn't put the stuff where things burn up. There's also a thing where things burn up every now and then. That seems more likely. Being here in Southern California, that kind of makes sense. I think if we were in Florida, we might question whether the flooding thing was accurate or not. But these floods are like biblical floods. They're like, Noah's Ark kind of floods.
Yeah, that's why I'm
Right?
curious as
But
to...
Noah doesn't survive these floods. Everything gets wiped out. But everybody's soul is sort of put on ice and then reincarnated.
Interesting.
Okay? So that's the deal. Now, you'll go online, and again, you will find people who've come up with something different than this. Okay? There's all sorts of Vedic astrology things out there. There's a whole astrological system that includes all this stuff. It's complicated. I'm not going to go into it. I don't know it well enough to really go into it. But just so you know, this comes from one source. You might find somebody else who comes up with a different thing. Okay? I like this one because it was relatively not doom and gloom, because we're at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, not at the end.
So has someone been tracing this back to
Many people.
years ago?
Many people trace things back. Yes, there's not just one.
Okay.
Yes, many.
What's to say we're in the 52nd or the 60th?
This guy's, well, by his calculations, this is where we
That's where we
are.
are.
Right. You'll find somebody else who did slightly different calculations, but not slightly.
Okay.
So just to warn you about it.
Just an idea.
But I like this one, so I like this one. Okay. So 426,000 years from now, things will be much worse. That's right. So take heart. On the other hand, things have been much better. So if you want to be cynical, you can see the glass is half empty or half full, whatever you like. All right. There's no single historical founder of Hinduism. There's no unified code of faith. There's no central authority. There's no bureaucratic structure. This makes it different than practically all other religions in the world, East and West. Okay? For me, this is one of the things I really like about Hinduism. You want to be Hindu? All you have to really say is, I'm a Hindu. I like this stuff. I think I'm a Hindu, right? And you're a Hindu. There's nobody to tell you that you're not. There's no secret ceremony you have to undergo and get branded, or get baptized or whatever. There's no central authority that issues certificates saying that you're this or that. This is what I like about it, personally. The definition and boundaries of who are considered Hindus is somewhat vague. There can be quite large differences between people who call themselves Hindus. Okay, this is something that's very important to know. Even though probably the majority of people who call themselves Hindus, the majority are going to adhere to the things I'm going to be telling you about, the pivotal beliefs and everything. Not all Hindus have these kind of things. There is sort of a magical mean in there, which most people are like this, and so I want to point that out. Because even though most people are going to be these things, most people who identify as Hindu are going to be these things, not everybody is. And there's lots of exceptions to this. Okay. So, with that caveat, 4 pivotal beliefs of Hinduism: karma, reincarnation, dharma, or rules or law, and a belief in some sort of all-pervasive divinity, supreme reality, God, gods, energy, unknowable something is there. Okay? For most Hindus, it's going to be some kind of divinity. And probably for most Hindus, this is going to be pantheistic, many gods, or seeing the many gods as the emanation of the one true God. There are plenty of monotheistically oriented Hindus who see all these panoply of gods as just representing the main God, different versions of the main God. 9 beliefs of Hinduism. This, by the way, is from a website called How to Become a Better Hindu. Hindus believe in the divinity of the Vedas. The Vedas are the sacred writing. I'll talk about more of those in a minute. And these are thought to be God's word, primordial hymns that are God's word, but they are not thought to be written by God, but written to be by men who are inspired by gods. Okay? Hindus believe in some sort of all-pervasive supreme reality, typically personified into gods. This God is both immanent and transcendent, the creator and manifest reality. This is going to become important later as a distinction between Hinduism and Buddhism. Because for Hinduism, the gods sort of always have been there. They're immanent, they transcend everything, they've always been there, and they always will be there. This is going to be, keep this in mind when we talking about Buddhism. This is where Buddhism really differs than Hinduism. Hindus believe the universe undergoes endless cycles of creation, preservation, and dissolution. We just talked about those. Hindus believe in karma, which is the law of cause and effect by which each individual creates his own destiny by his thoughts, words, and deeds, and I would add intentions as well. We'll talk more about karma. Hindus believe that the soul, which is relatively permanent in the sense that it will last for 311 trillion years, whatever. The soul is relatively permanent, and it will reincarnate, evolving through many births until all karmas have been resolved, and moksha, which is sort of enlightenment, spiritual knowledge and liberation from the cycle of rebirth is attained. Not a single soul will be eternally deprived of this destiny. Eventually, everybody reaches enlightenment in Hinduism. Eventually. May take a while, but eventually everybody reaches enlightenment. Hindus believe that divine beings exist in unseen worlds, and that temple worship, rituals, and sacraments, as well as personal devotions, create communion with these demigods and gods. Devas are demigods. Hindus believe that a spiritually awakened master, a Satguru, which we shorten to guru typically, is essential to know the transcendent absolute as our personal discipline, good conduct, purification, pilgrimage, self-inquiry, and meditation. Hindus believe that all life is sacred to be loved and revered, and therefore practice ahimsa. Ahimsa is called non-injury to beings. That's how we think of it, non-injury to beings. Okay, this has not been the case for all Hindus, and still not, most Hindus practice this, the majority, not all. Okay, depending on, there are some that do not practice this. Most practices. Okay? This is also something that gets carried over from Hinduism into Buddhism. And I've been told by a Hindu scholar that actually Hinduism was much more violent, but after Buddhism, they decided to really up the emphasis on ahimsa, on non-injury. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was told to me by a Hindu scholar. Hindus believe that no particular religion teaches the only way to salvation above all the others, but all genuine religious paths are facets of God's pure love and light and deserve tolerance and understanding. Again, this makes Hinduism very different than other religions. If you're a Christian and you're a true Christian, Hindus have no problem with that. You should be doing what you're doing. What you're doing is awesome. Keep at it. You know, that's fine. Yes?
Although those are the tenets, is it actually followed?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, most Hindus, this is the mean, right? Most Hindus, you know, that magic mean of, you know, the average Hindu, this is what they believe. This is what they follow, yes. Now, let's talk about these central ideas shared by most Hindus. These are important, and these are some of the more confusing ones for you guys to get. Reincarnation. You all know what reincarnation is, right? You have a soul, it's relatively eternal, 311 trillion years, we'll call that eternal, permanent. Your soul moves from life to life to life. In other words, you exist in this sort of, your soul exists in sort of an incorporeal form without a body. When you were born, right before you were born, you experienced Vasnaiva, which is the memory loss of your previous life. By the way, this doesn't always work perfectly. So I'm going to talk to you about that, because the Vasnaiva sometimes doesn't work perfectly, and sometimes people remember their past lives. Then you're born, your soul incarnates into a body, and your soul experiences life. So the name of the soul is Atman. Atman literally means the performer of the action which bears fruit. In other words, the definition of the soul is that thing which makes karma. Okay, this is going to become very important in Buddhism, because Buddhism really takes this super seriously. Okay? This is going to, again, be one of the differences between Buddhism and Hinduism. In Hinduism, the Atman is permanent. It lasts from life to life to life, and it is the core of your identity that experiences the karma, that makes karma. When you live your life, certain things happen, you do certain things, you die, and then because of the karma you've accrued, that dictates your rebirth. So if you do bad things, you have a bad rebirth. If you do good things, you have a good rebirth. Whatever habitual things that you built up, your soul's experience will more likely lead to a certain kind of rebirth. Okay? And you go round and round and round in this, and eventually, you resolve your karmas, things balance out, and you're able to escape from this cycle of samsara. This whole cycle is called samsara. You're able to escape from this and achieve moksha, which is salvation, which is freedom from the cycle of samsara. Okay? This is it in a nutshell. Yes?
How about the people who choose not to escape the cycle?
That's Buddhism. We're going to get to that. That's Buddhism. So hold on to that, okay? Hold on to that thought. We'll get to there. But in Hinduism, everybody escapes. Just, you go around and around and around, you resolve all your stuff, work out all your issues, eventually work out all your issues, and then you get light. Yes?
Okay, so once you achieve moksha, you only have so much time left before your soul disappears.
Once you achieve moksha, you're off this cycle. Your
But
soul is
doesn't your
off the
soul
cycle.
only last for 311, whatever?
That's a long time.
It's relative, maybe.
I don't know what, by the way, I don't know if you achieve moksha, if you're now off the cycle, and so then you're no longer subject to the laws of Brahma. Now, that's a very good point, because what you'll find in Hinduism is lots of inconsistencies. So, the fact that, time is actually limited, 311 trillion years. Maybe once you're off moksha, it doesn't matter anymore. That would be
Or
my
maybe
guess.
time flies and you're having fun.
Yeah, maybe. But my guess is once you're off the cycle, you're off the cycle. You're no longer subject to Brahma's days and time. You're no longer subject to the linearity of time, you're out of that, okay? Because that's all stuff that's conditioned. So you don't have to worry about that. But this is the idea. Now, the idea of karma is actually simpler. Karma, I think we can all understand. Pretty simple. Karma is just actions that have effects, okay? Actions have effects. If I go up to this guy and I punch him in the face, wham, right? He doesn't like that. I could get immediate karma. He's bigger and stronger than me. He beats the crap out of me right in and out, right? Or let's say he's a little bit, nicer guy, And what he does, he goes, wow, our professor just came up and whacked me one in the face. I don't like that. And he goes to the president and files a complaint, and then a month later I get fired, right? That's my karma. The action that I had an effect. And especially negative actions have strong effects, right? Strongly negative effects. And say I punch him, he gets all pissed off, you know, he goes, and I lose my job, but in the meantime, he's kind of pissed off, and he goes up to her and he starts calling her bad names because he's all mad, right? Now she's pissed off and kind of flows like wildfire, right? And it sort of kind of grows. So negative karma has lots of bad things. On the other hand, if I go up to him and say, man, you are a great student, you know what? Here's $100 bill. You know, just being a great student, show up to class. You know, I'm so happy you're here. Here's $100. Wow, now he feels really good. Oh, man, I feel so good. You know, and he sees her struggling. She looks like she didn't have a cup of coffee this morning. He's like, hey, you're so, you know, I buy you a cup of coffee. And she's like, oh, he's so nice to me. Now my day, she has her coffee. She feels so good. She goes around, you know, and now the good stuff gets spread around. Right? And what happens is people get less volatile, less angry, and things are better. Okay? So there is a difference between good and bad karma. Again, we're going to see this more in Buddhism as well. But there's a difference between good and bad. But bad karmas make more drama. Good karmas resolve issues. Okay? That's an underlying sort of principle in this stuff. It's not really spoken outwardly, but it's really there. Okay? That makes sense? Does that make sense? So again, one of the things of being Hindu, you talk about virtuous versus being bad. You know, being virtuous means promoting good karma, doing good things. Right? Be nice to people, and they'll be nice to somebody, and the world becomes a better place, and we have less drama, right? We're all happier, and then we can get off this cycle, because there's enough suffering just in this cycle, birth and death, that we have to go through, right? Suffering, you know, a lot of suffering there, so we're going to get rid of this, okay, by being nice, okay? And we're going to discourage being mean, because it makes more drama, okay? And you know this, right? You all know this kind of intuitively. Everybody got that friend or friends, the ones who like to make drama. You know what I'm talking about? You all know somebody in your circle of people is the one who makes drama, right? And one who makes drama. And do you like hanging out with that person? Hopefully you're not that person, by the way.
If you don't know that person, you are that person.
Yeah, well, that may be, yeah. But you know, that person may be a good person underneath. You may sense they've got a good heart, but you kind of don't really want to hang out with them because you know something drama is going to happen, right? Unless you're addicted to the drama, and then you should take my other class, we'll talk all about that. But you know what I'm talking about? You know if you're hanging out with them, that you like them and everything, but there's, you know if you hang out with them, there's going to be that real possibility that there's going to be some thing you just don't want to be involved with, you know? It's going to mouth off to somebody or do something, say, oh God, not again, right? You know the person I'm talking about, right? And then you have that other friend who like is really cool, and like, you know, when you hang out with them, things just seem to be really relaxed and mellow and, you know, nice. And that person, oh yeah, well, I really like hanging out with that person, right? Again, so we have an innate sense of what's good and bad karma, right? And if we really clear our minds, we're able to be clear about what we like, we really tend to like the good stuff, right? Not the bad stuff. Yes?
But you could easily flip-flop it and say, well,
Yes.
I've been really good, so now I can punch him in the face.
Because, of course, your previous karma has been that you have been habituated to that, right? You could say, oh, I banked up all this karma. I'm just banking up karma because, you know, I'm going to do all these good things, so I'll bank up this karma and then I'm going to get rich. And there's all sorts of great Hindu stories about that. Yes, you could do that, yes. But again, then you do the bad things, and then you make all this drama, and then it's taking you longer and longer and longer to get through this, right? If you could just do the good things all the time, this will get resolved more quickly. Okay? And then you'll have less suffering. Because the suffering isn't just in this life, it's like for all lives.
But you will make it eventually.
Eventually in Hinduism you will make it.
And
Yeah. Eventually you'll make it. But in the meantime, there's a lot of suffering that goes on. Yeah. Now when we get to Buddhism, there'll be more emphasis on the suffering. Okay? The Buddhism are like, yeah, we really don't like this suffering. We really want to get off this, right? In Hinduism, it's like there's a lot of patience. Again, because this conception of time being so vast, plenty of time to get it right, right? We'll get through it, you know, okay, there's some drama now, but it'll all pass, and, you know, things will get better. So again, this sense in Hinduism of like, you know, of not being in a rush, of patience. Right? Well, all eventually, even the worst acting person, eventually they're going to get it together. Okay? It's kind of a nice thing. Yes, your question?
Isn't there like a rollover thing where the karma from your past life also goes into?
Yes, this is what this is. This is the rollover right here. The karma conditions your next birth, okay? Yes?
Does Hinduism ever discuss how souls are even created? You know what I mean?
Yes, there are myths about that. I'm blanking on them right now, but there's some myths about that. There's origin myths in Hinduism. And we can talk a little bit, I think I have one I'm gonna talk to you guys about. There's a couple of them.
Yeah, my question, I guess, with that would be like, what soul would even want to go through this cycle?
Well, I don't think you have a choice. I think this is just it.
So,
That we're a manifestation of, again, it's a little like Christianity. At least in one version, we're the manifestation that we are the spark of godhood, made flesh, right? And so our job is then to get back to that divine state. Again, this is not that different than, Plato or early Christian beliefs about that, that we have that divine, we are made in the image of God, and so our job is to get back to that divinity. And so we resolve our karmas, then we get back to that divinity, we realize our divinity, right? So this is similar to that, okay? Yes?
Isn't there another thing about reincarnation, that you're not necessarily reincarnated as a human?
You're not necessarily reincarnated as a human. You tend to be reincarnated according to whatever habitual patterns you have. But if your patterns are more animalistic, for instance, you may be reincarnated as an animal. And again, there's all sorts of stories, somebody did this and that, so they got reincarnated as a chicken, somebody got reincarnated as a rock. I mean, yeah, there's lots of different, and again, in Hinduism, the world is animate, even rocks can have, an energy to them. So there's again, and you'll hear stories about this and this kind of thing. Yeah, you're not necessarily going to be reincarnated as a human. Okay. Now, when we talk about Buddhism, we'll talk about reincarnation. In Buddhism, they'll talk about how reincarnation as a human is extremely rare and is really tough. So the fact that you're all here and reincarnated as humans means that like a lot of things had to happen for you to get here, and you don't want to waste that. You don't want to blow it and go back to being a snail or something. It's really bad. Yes.
Does positive karma have to be altruistic to get compensation?
Again, in Hinduism, I think it works both ways, because there's plenty of stories of people who are doing good karma in order for some ultimate gain, but then they get some ultimate gain, then they sort of screw it up, and then start doing some bad stuff. They get greedy, whatever it is, and then they waste that good karma, and then their next rebirth is not as good. They exhaust the good karma. Okay? But the idea is eventually you want to even out all the karmas. Okay? You want everything to even out. Yes?
Isn't that called meriting, when you try to stack up good karma?
Yeah, it's essentially like that. Yeah, you can get merit. But that can be good. You can do that in a good way. Like, I want to increase merit, so my merit in this life is really good, so the next life I can be reborn in a more religious place, a more religious household. I'll have a better chance to achieve moksha. You are banking up for the future. So there's a good motivation and there's a bad motivation. Right? Now, in Buddhism, we'll talk about that too, because it's the same in Buddhism. Okay, this idea of merit. In Buddhism, however, what happens is they realize that people are really getting into this too much.
Yeah.
It becomes the goal. So what they do is they just say, well, you have to give it all away. The ultimate getting good merit is to give all the merit away. Right? So Buddhism gets rid of the goal orientation. We're going to talk about that. Yes?
If time isn't linear, how do you have cause and effect?
You have cause and effect in the sense that everything is illusionary. So again, it's like I look out over, it's just like geography. I look out over the quad here, and that to me appears like a straight line between me and that tree out there, right? But if I really looked at the big picture, and I could see the whole earth, I could see that actually that line from me to that tree is actually slightly curved. There's a slight curve to it, because I don't see that because I'm only looking at this small thing. It looks like a straight line. But if I went around the whole earth, it would be curved. It would come back to itself, right? And so it's that kind of metaphor that I like to think of, right? Again, if you're a flat earth believer, then, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry for you. I feel bad for you in many ways, but you won't get this metaphor at all, right? But this is the idea that it appears to be linear, but if you look at the bigger picture, it's actually circular.
So like circular or spherical?
Either way, you can think of it either way. You think you're going from here to there, it's a straight line, but actually there's a slight curve to it, right? I mean, we can tell that, right? Sorry, you flat earth people, but if I go out here and I look toward Japan, I don't see Japan. I can have the really strongest binoculars, I still won't see Japan. Why? Because the earth curves, right, over the horizon. I have to actually bounce the light up off the sky, and, radio waves, By the way, flat earthers, a good way to disprove flat earth thing is radio waves. I can't send a radio wave directly from here to Japan. It will not go. I have to bounce it off a satellite or the sky or something and then back down to Japan, right? Because there's a curve in the earth, right? But if you just look out over here, I can't see that. It just appears linear. Our conception of time appears linear because we're just seeing this short bit. Okay? So that's where the cause and effect. So it's cause and effect makes this, makes this, makes this, makes this. Eventually, it can come back, right? Yes, yes.
Back to the reincarnation thing. So seeing as this is India, if you were to accumulate a lot of good karma, would you reincarnate as a cow?
It just depends on whatever habits you've picked up. If your habits are cow-like, and you have enough of them, you can become a cow. Or if you have enough things, you can become reincarnated in some sort of more higher up being, right? There's also, by the way, I'll make it more complicated for you. There are, in Hinduism, traditionally 31 dimensions. I always think of Baskin Robbins, 32 flavors. 31 dimensions that you can be reincarnated into. Some are better than others. We exist in one of those, right? The Buddhists are going to boil that down into 6, thank God. But there's 31 dimensions you can be born into. So it's not even necessarily going to be born here in this sort of realm that we live in. You can be born in another dimension which has different kind of characteristics. So it's very, very complicated. Okay? Yes?
Is good karma with bad intent really just bad karma?
It is, yes, because eventually what's happened is that's going to come back and bite you. Yeah. And that's what he was talking about, meriting, right? Stacking up merit. Really what I want to do is just get rich and have power over people. But to do that, I got to be nice and fool people so they'll give me money. I appear really nice, but really I'm just out for power. I don't want to mention any politicians, but actually I could just mention all of them. This is, I'm going to be really nice. I'm going to come off as a really nice guy. You're going to really like me. You're going to vote for me, and then I'm going to get power over you, and I can do whatever I want, right? So that would be an example, right? I'm not saying that all politicians are bad, but, this is a typical thing. Yes?
If a lot has to happen for us to come back as humans, why are there bad people?
Don't confuse Buddhism and Hinduism. So I do this too all the time.
Okay.
Save that question.
Okay.
Because that's
For
a very
Buddhism?
good question. But the short answer is because it's complicated.
Okay.
Because we're a mixture of things.
Yeah.
Right? And we might think we're really good, but somewhere down there is a non-virtuous thought or intention lurking around somewhere. It's really hard to be really completely good all the time.
It's true.
Right?
3/4, right?
So again, for Hindus, they're just patient about it. For Buddhists, now we're going to get rid of this. We're gonna, And so again, we'll talk about this one. A little bit difference there. Yes.
Could you say that would relate in a way to Freud's theory of the suppressed unconscious?
Yes, absolutely. Very good. Gold star for you today. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is in a way, this is kind of Freudian. Like if you think about it, we want to do good things in our conscious life, but we've got all this unresolved stuff that's repressed that we're not aware of that influence us to do things. So most of us, if we think about things, I think most of us think of ourselves as good people, right? Even if you think, I'm a badass, but you're a good badass, right? I'm a badass for righteousness. I'm going to go out and do, but then you go out and you end up doing something stupid. Oh God, why did I do that? That's like, well, that's Freud. You had something, you repressed it, you were unaware of it, and it exerted influence.
As far as reincarnation, like she was saying, a bad person, maybe that's the part that's being expressed.
Yeah, you may not realize it, may be repressed. And so part of going through the cycle over and over again, if you think about it, Freudian, is to make the unconscious conscious, till you're aware of all that stuff. If you're aware that it's bad, you won't do it, right? But as long as it's unconscious, it's going to affect you. And karma can work exactly the same way. Now, when we talk about the Buddhist version of karma, that will even make more sense. Okay? I don't want to go there yet. Okay? We'll get to that. That's a little bit different. Little difference, it's really profound. We'll get to that. But it's a similar idea. Okay? Yeah, very good.